So the first one would
Sorry.
be the sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
No, sorry.
So there are two main websites to keep in mind. The first one is the EU Business in Japan website, which is basically just an overview of all of our services and activities. You will find here, the second one, the EU Japan website is the information of all of our services. The EU Business in Japan website is a library, essentially. We have recorded webinars, we have expert reports, there is general help desks that can help you on certain subjects. So some of the examples, for example, in sectorial reports, you can find startup economies, healthcare, wine, so both general sectors and subsectors. Then some of the next webinars that are going to be organized. So these are public webinars you can take part in, but then which are later recorded, are the cross-cultural webinars. For example, the next one is on a smart aging project, which is part of the Horizon 2023. Next, there are a few more reports and videos that deal more with the subjects that we are going to talk about today, which Angela will introduce to you. Something that is a bit very interesting is the EU-Japan EPA help desk. So as you might or might not know, that in 2019, Japan and the EU signed the Economic Partnership Agreement, which enabled a lot of the trade tariffs, about 99% of trade tariffs, to slowly disappear. So they're also still in the process of disappearing, but also non-tariff barriers, which are slowly disappearing. And so we have created this help desk to help you benefit from the EPA. There are various publications, there are various webinars, but there is also an info desk where you can ask specific questions. These are, for example, some of the fact sheets that you may find. Then there are two handbooks, one for importers, one for exporters. That is to say that the EPA is a two-way street, as well as, I have not put it here, but we have a new series of podcasts as well that have just gotten out because we are modern and we do podcasts. So next, we also work with the EEN, which is the Enterprise Europe Network, which promotes, in our case, this is the EEN. We are the EEN Japan partner. So we promote EU company profiles to various Japanese companies, distributors, importers, etc. We facilitate meetings, and you may take part in trade fairs, networking events, etc. One of the examples of what we can do is, for example, put your profile up where it is translated in Japanese, which is a huge, kind of a huge step and a big help. But there are also other ways. Then for food manufacturers, there is a platform where EU and Japanese companies can match through. There is the Get Ready for Japan mission, which is very interesting as it is currently open to accept applications. So this is a 2-week, more of a 10 days, 2-week trip to Japan where you can take part in lectures, negotiation simulations, B2B meetings, etc. In order to eventually do business in Japan or improve your business in Japan. There are 3 missions which unfortunately have recently passed, but the recruitment process will start very soon again. So biotech, ICT, and nanotech missions, which are usually around this time every year, so in October and November and January and February. There are training missions in Japan, which are focused on manufacturing, such as the WCM. The spring session is coming up soon, and the autumn session in November will soon open applications as well. The lean visits in the EU are part of the manufacturing missions to some degree, but it is only a visit to certain companies and discussion on different methodologies. Finally, I would like to talk to you about the Volcanus, which is a scheme for EU companies to host Japanese interns. There's also Volcanus in Japan, which is the Japanese companies hosting European interns. So which is very interesting. It helps innovation R&D and generally helps with creating a more diverse environment and the possibility of overcoming a language barrier, possibly when working with the Japanese, for example, for EU companies. We offer innovation R&D, such as the technology transfer help desk, which is very interesting, as well as clusters, support and help desk, and promotion of Horizon Europe calls. And finally, a few other supports we offer is, for example, logistical support in Japan, where you can have a physical space. There is sponsoring market entry plan drafts for SMEs. There is a public procurement and tax help desk, which has, for example, weekly digest where you can find out about procurement calls, and the new EJ3A help desk, which helps with cooperation with ASEAN, Africa, and Latin America. Okay, so here are all of the summary of all of the websites that you might need, as well as the contact for you. So please feel free to contact us when, if necessary. Okay, so finally, I would like to present our wonderful expert. So Ms. Angela Kessel has been working as a project manager with Japanese companies for more than 20 years. She's an experienced intercultural consultant and coach, focusing on the interface between Europe and Japan. Her workshops are interactive, offer up-to-date information on doing business with Japan, as you will soon see. Angela, you may have the floor.
I'm awfully sorry. I thought I had unmuted myself already, but somehow the button didn't quite work as I wanted it to work. My apologies. I just need to return very quickly to the front page of this screen. So just give me a little second here while I can say thank you very much indeed, Anna, for the very, very kind introduction that you gave. As you mentioned, I've been doing business for quite some time already with Japanese business partners, and I have the pleasure to be able to do this for the center many times. So I'm very, very glad to be here back with you today. Okay, something's not quite working as well as it should with the presentation because it doesn't want to take me to the first page. Just give me a little second here, and that should be working immediately. Anna already said it. We are mainly focusing today on interaction with the Japanese. We have tried to make a program that really, really suits your personal needs in terms of meeting the Japanese for the first time and also doing communication with them. Okay, here's another try with the presentation. That looks much better to me now. Yes, here we should be going. Sorry for the hiccup. Let's take a closer look at what we will be doing today. First of all, of course, you need to prepare the trip for Japan. So what is important here in terms of material, business cards, and so forth? We will then be looking at meeting the Japanese for the first time. And of course, indirect communication is a very important topic because this is usually where Europeans and Japanese differ a lot. We have many cultures that communicate very directly. Yours may be one of them, whereas the Japanese, compared to the rest of the world, are extremely indirect. So here is a lot of conflict potential that we want to avoid. And after all, we will be looking at how to socialize, what to do, and where are the pitfalls when you meet the Japanese after work. So let's get into the middle of things. I get a lot of questions of what to bring to Japan. You may all know that it is a culture that is very much focusing on excellent relationships, also in business, and giving each other small gifts is a sign of supporting good relations. So this is what it's all about. But that doesn't mean that you need to go over the top of them. First of all, what the center always mentions is that you do not need to bring presents for the center staff. You will be meeting people from the EU Japan Center from Japan probably. Don't bring anything for them. They are fine. Presents are needed when, for example, making visits to companies, when meeting important people. Then it would be nice that you as a delegation brought a little present, something small, nothing expensive, because nowadays there is compliance, and you should only think of little things like chocolates, for example. I will later show you what could be appropriate. In any case, they should be nicely wrapped, as you can see on the little picture here. Bright colors are very, very much liked in Japan. So if you think of a nice wrapping, you are good to go. Chocolates are always a good idea, as I said, especially if you're making visits, or if you visit a trade fair, or if you're working at a trade fair, something like that. That should be great. So what is generally suitable? Think of a few chocolates and biscuits. Make sure that they are separately packed, such as shown in this picture here. For purposes of hygiene, Japanese prefer to have separately packed things. You could also bring any other small delicacy or special items from your country. That is also very much appreciated. Or if you have interesting company goods like, I don't know, rulers or anything with your company logos on them, that should also work perfectly. So think in these little terms and think of presents for the whole group that you're visiting. It's just a small gesture, a small signal of kindness. So if you've got some time before the trip, think of organizing a few little presents. Business cards, of course, are very important. And when we later get to the question of meeting the Japanese for the first time, I will let you know how to hand over the business cards themselves. But for the time being, let's speak about what you need to prepare in terms of business cards. And first of all, I would like to say, bring plenty, especially if you do all those visits that Andrea just earlier mentioned. You will need a lot of business cards. Sometimes you are introduced to a whole bunch of people at a time, and it's always very embarrassing if you run out of them. So prepare at least a big package. Have a holder for them. As you can see in the little photo up here, it's extremely important to not pull them out of your jacket or pull them out of your purse or something that is considered to be impolite. So a special case that is dedicated to only business cards, I would like to say, is a must. And think of being able, and that is the last point here on my slide, think of being able to access them very, very quickly, especially as we've got many ladies participating today. If you need time to pull them out of your handbag, like I have to do sometimes, the moment may just be gone. You need to be able to hand them over quickly. So a jacket with a pocket where you can store them is perfect to have. Some people may worry about the niche of Japanese business cards. That is not necessary. As a matter of fact, English is just fine. If you absolutely want Japanese, then please have a professional translator do the translations. And sometimes when you deal with Japan, because people know hierarchy plays a big role, people have the tendency to raise their titles and make themselves look a little bit more important than they actually are. But I'm sure that you are important already. Don't do this. I think it's better to be fair and transparent, and your titles will be fine and your ranks will be definitely sufficient also for the Japanese counterparts. So that's it, basically, for the preparations, the things that you need to do before you go on the trip. What is it meeting the Japanese for the first time? What is that like, and what do you need to be prepared for? Let's take a look at that. First of all, people would always like to know, how do I need to be dressed? In Japan, business attire is still rather formal. It is becoming a little more casual, but still on the formal side, meaning that suits are appropriate for men. And ladies can wear pants without any issues. A pant or a skirt suit is fine. As for the men, whether you need a necktie or not, a little bit depends on the company, but I think better be prepared and have the necktie with you. And if you are encouraged to take it off, then please follow suit and do so. For the ladies, anything that may appear over the top, such as heavy makeup, jewelry, big jewelry, a lot of perfume, a red nail polish, and perhaps the combination of all of this may be considered very chic in our countries, but it is a little bit on the not so serious and business-like side in Japan. So stay away from combining all these different accessories, but still be yourself. You don't need to appear all demure and modest. What should be avoided, and I think it's easy for this time of the year, at any rate, are naked legs or naked shoulders. So shoulderless or sleeveless blouses are not to be at least shown if you wear a jacket on top. That is fine, of course. Sometimes for missions to Japan, there is also talk about being on the trade fair booth or having meetings on trade fairs or going to trade fairs. This does not actually seem to be the case in your with your special trip, but in such cases, I'd like to mention that, of course, CI clothing is fine, and if you appear as a team or group, then you could still wear shirts or polo shirts and come across as a little bit less formal. When meeting the Japanese for the first time, you may be wondering if you actually need to bow. And the answer is no, you don't need to. Here is a chart that shows a little bit of how many rules there are for the Japanese to bow in an appropriate way. But those rules are for the Japanese. They are quite interesting to look at, and it's quite interesting to know that there are different angles depending on how high-ranking the person is that you're meeting. For example, that men and women do it differently. Please feel free to take a look at this chart when we'll be sending you the presentation after this webinar, but don't follow the rules. A light European handshake will be just fine. Most Japanese people, I think more than 90% nowadays, are so internationally experienced and so international minded that they will offer you a handshake anyway. If you bow a little bit at the same time when, for example, automatically mirroring their behavior, and this is just perfect, but you get away with a handshake. Don't squeeze their hands too tight, but not so much used to handshakes. at all so far. And now to the business cards themselves and how to hand them over. There are two ways of doing it. You can do it with both hands, which is the most polite and often seen way. But sometimes, as you can see here on in our little picture, it's also done with the right hand and at almost the same time. My advice always is to be a little bit, to show a little bit of restraint and just first watch what the Japanese do, how they organize it, and then react to that. Japanese like restraint, like people that hold back a little bit. So you always have the luxury of being able to first observe yourself before you follow suit and do things as the Japanese do. So usually with both hands and in such a way that your partner can read your business cards immediately. This is how you hand them over, and you would say what you would say in English. You would say, I am very pleased to meet you. My name is of such and such company, and something like that will be totally fine. When you receive the other person's card, you should do that with a lot of respect and appreciation. That means that you take the card into your hand and you study it carefully. You do not put away with it right away. Take a moment to read the name of the person, to read the title, and you may also want to repeat some of those things that are written on the business card. You may, for example, want to say, you're Mrs. Suzuki, right? I'm very pleased to meet you. Or you would like to say something like, you're the general manager. That's very nice. Very nice meeting you, Edie. Something like that to show a little bit of appreciation. What is important to know is that you should not write anything on the cards while the partners who gave you the cards are still present and in the room. That would be very impolite. Once you have split, you can do that. You can jot down anything on the business cards that helps you to actually remember the people and pick up a communication at a later point in time. Sometimes people would also like to know who goes first with the handing over of business cards. Usually it's the lower ranking partner. So if you come to Japan as a supplier and meet a customer, usually you would go first. But then again, as I said, just wait and see and let the Japanese take the initiative. Don't just too quickly do anything. Business cards. As Anna said, if you've got any questions, there is a Q&A session at the end. And there's also a chat where you can write down your own questions. So don't hesitate if there is anything. When in a meeting, how can you expect to be seated? There are different seating orders, but usually there is always one logic to it, and that is that the people that are the hosts or the people in the lower position, but in Japan, Japanese would be the hosts, and the hosts would be sitting at the side of the room that is closer to the entrance. That is something that still comes from the old samurai days in Japan, where you needed to be careful sitting with your back to a sliding door, because people could open the door and stab you from behind, and that was very dangerous, of course. So the hosts will be sitting on that dangerous side of the table and will probably ask you to be seated on the opposite side. As a matter of fact, and that's just a question of general politeness, I suppose, you do not sit down just like that, but you wait to be seated and you take the seats that are offered to you. It would make sense if there is any kind of hierarchy that the most senior person, and they are in this chart, on this chart, indicated by the number 1, would be seated in the middle so as to have access to everybody in the room. So this is how it works. And as I said, just wait for what is going to happen and where you get seated. You've probably prepared a few gifts. I don't know about your country, but in many European countries, people have a tendency to hand over gifts at the very beginning of a meeting, saying something like, hello, I'm coming from Germany, from Romania, or wherever, and here's my present. In Japan, it's done the other way around. You would be handing over presents at the end of a meeting only. And nowadays, gifts may be opened right away and immediately if you're encouraged to do so. People say, please open. Then that's good. You may explain what your gifts are all about, but please do not boast off and say this is something very expensive or something very valuable. Modesty is one of the main Japanese values, and so you would like to appear modest, and that would also include not to boast off about your own present and make it look a little bit smaller and less valuable as perhaps it actually is. Gift giving. Otherwise, what are general tips that one can give for first-time meetings? As I said before, modesty and reserve are very important. Hierarchy plays a big role in Japan, so perhaps you can try to figure out who the seniors are, and the senior persons are usually the ones that everybody is focusing on. You would like to be especially polite towards them and respectful towards them. Here is a tip for people who are working at a trade fair booth, but I think it doesn't apply to you, so let's just skip this one. Very well. We've got many women in the room, and I would like to quickly address the question of women. Women in Japan can be found on all levels nowadays. So there are still very few women in high-ranking top management spheres, but they are there as well. And generally, a woman can do anything in Japan. If she makes it to the top, if she's an important member of the delegation or whatever, she needs to be treated according to her rank. This is true for all Japanese women, but especially for the non-Japanese ones. So please do not hesitate and hold back. Just because you're a woman, you can be just as open, or let's say as self-confident as you would be in your own country. So no hesitations there. Generally, what can you expect from a first encounter with the Japanese? Networking. This is, of course, the point here. Andrea also showed that in her presentation. You can also lay the basis for future trustful contact. So meeting the Japanese, getting their business cards is extremely important for future contacts. And this is where you lay the fundament for all of this, but especially during a trade meeting or a trade mission, but also in first-time meetings. Don't expect too much and don't expect to be going back home with too many concrete results. It's just a little seed that you put into the earth and that you can make grow and blossom at a later point in time. This said, I think we can finish off the first meeting parts, and I would like to focus now on indirect communication and how that all works, because this is, as I said in the introductory part, very, very important for keeping relationships harmonious. Generally, what we can say is that people in Japan tend to be indirect. They have a strong focus on people and relationships. They want to keep those relationships harmonious, and they want to avoid conflict or direct criticism at any rate, because they do feel that this harms the relationship very much. So better stay away from that. Opposed to that, not in all European countries, but as a general tendency, we are more matter focused. We perhaps care less about harmony, but more about honesty. So this is where we differ and vary a little bit. Now, let's take a look at hierarchy and how that is connected with direct and indirect communication. As I said before, hierarchy plays a very important role. And the Japanese say that wherever you find yourself, in a family, in private life, in business, of course, there is always up and down. Some relationships are very obvious. For example, a customer would always be on the top of a relationship, and a supplier would always be at the bottom of a relationship. So supplier is always down and a customer is always very high up. The Japanese say that the customers are gods, and they need to be treated as such. So in general, in Japan, one would say when you're very low down in the hierarchy relationship, you always have to be careful, indirect, and very much reserved. Whereas when you are, for example, a customer, you have got more freedom. You have the right, in the Japanese logic of hierarchy, to be more direct, more demanding. So if at a later stage of your business relationship you come across customers that are not very indirect, but they are very upfront with you, don't worry about it. And please remember that with different hierarchy levels, you've got different rights and possibilities. That said, what is the general approach towards communication and indirectness? Here is a first example, first small case study about communication. It's about Mr. King, who works for a company that distributes watches and jewelry in a number of European countries. At a trade fair, he has met a Japanese manufacturer of wristwatches. The products are very interesting for European consumers. Mr. King has bought some of the Japanese watches and has introduced them to his European customers with much success. He has now traveled back to Japan to meet with the Japanese manufacturers and to give them feedback. He starts off with positive comments and says that everything goes very well. When he asks whether one certain watch can be equipped with an alarm function, the friendly atmosphere somehow changes a little bit. The Japanese scratch their heads and mumble something about very difficult. Mr. King gets no clear answer from their side. And I would like to ask you, please open your microphone so that we can now go for the more interactive part of this webinar. What is your idea? What does Mr. King probably want to say when he says it is very difficult? Any ideas here? Would anybody like to make a comment? Very difficult. What could that mean? No ideas. Let's try something. I just very quickly stop my presentation and I send you a Mentimeter link. It should have arrived on your desks by now. Please check and give me a little signal. Perhaps, Anna, you can check the chat very quickly and see.
Yeah, it's there. It works.
It works very well. So
Yeah.
please go to the Mentimeter link and there you can vote. I will quickly share my presentation here, my Mentimeter presentation. I can see that voting is already going on, so that is perfect. I'm giving you 3 different options here. You can either go for, here we go. You can either vote for the first option, and that would mean that it is very difficult, means that it's actually not that difficult at all, and it's easy to do. You could vote for number 1, which would mean that it is challenging, but it is doable and somehow possible. And the third option that you can go for is that it is difficult actually means that it is almost impossible and not doable at all. I can see that I got 2 votes already. So please, I give you a little more time here to get your vote done. I can see a third one popping in. It's now all a little bit tending on the it's almost impossible side. There we got a 4th vote, and it's now actually very equal. 2 saying it is challenging but somehow possible, 2 saying it's almost impossible. Anybody who's still trying to vote and can't do it, because we've got 10 participants by now, so there should be a few more of you trying to participate here. All right, so it's equal, 2 saying it's challenging, 2 saying it's almost impossible. And I will show you and immediately let you know, stop sharing now and go back to my own presentation screen. I will let you know what the real and the correct answer is, so to speak. If the Japanese say it is very difficult, that would to well, a degree or a likelihood of about 90% mean that it is actually not possible. Japanese do not like to say no because they feel that an open no means I don't want to cooperate with you, I don't like you. So there is a personal comment and a personal negative touch to it. So they want to avoid the word no, if possible, at any rate. And this is why they've got a lot of workarounds for it and a lot of codes that mean no without saying no. One of them is, and we've seen that just in the last case study, one of them, and the most popular one, is to say it is very difficult, or to say I'm not sure, please let me think about it, I will try, I have to talk to my boss. So all these phrases are workarounds for a no. So watch out for them. And if you feel comfortable with them, you can also use these phrases yourself to say no. Also, please watch out for any non-verbal signals. If the Japanese cross their arms and tilt their heads to the side and then start to suck air through the teeth, like I'm doing it now, like this, and they appear to be very suffering and having a hard time, this is also a way to say no. They want to show you how much they are suffering and how difficult it is. So that's also a very important signal that you can catch. And finally, there are a lot of technical workarounds to express a no. For example, if you ask a question several times over and there is still no answer, there's just silence, no reaction, ignorance from the Japanese, that would rather mean no, thank you. I don't want to tell you, but please interpret my silence as a no. Also, if they suddenly change topics during communication, or if they give very roundabout, elusive answers, please consider whether perhaps they want to say no. So be prepared for this kind of signal indicating a no. In general, a no is avoided, but also very, very direct questions, requests, or any kind of criticism is to be avoided, so as to keep the atmosphere bright and positive. Now, we could easily in a meeting say to somebody, I need these data from you, or please send me the data. That is very direct, quite demanding. So if you wanted to put these comments in a more indirect, friendly, soft wording, what would you say? I open the floor to comments from your side. Instead of saying, I need the data from you, what would you say talking to a Japanese person? Please give me some of your comments and ideas. Anybody, please open your microphones and just let me know. Probably not so easy to figure that out when you hear about Japanese business culture for the first time. It's always a good idea not to make a request in the form of a statement, but to put requests and demands in the shape of questions. So instead of saying, I need this data, you could say something like, would you mind sending me the data? Or you could say something like, may I perhaps kindly ask you to send the data? These are all very suitable ideas. The questioning is good, but also the use of softening terms is very good. So as you can see, there is a lot of woulds and may I and coulds and perhapses and kindly. Those kind of words really, really are abundant in Japanese language, or when the Japanese speak English. So try to use them as well. Use phrases like, could you please, or would you mind? Something like this is always very nice to tone things down a little bit. So generally, what is important in communication with Japanese is to avoid an open no at the start. That would be rather rough. Reactions like nodding of the head and comments like saying yes, yes, yes. This is something that you also come across quite a bit. The Japanese, when listening to you, may be nodding, seemingly in agreement, but actually this kind of nodding all the time does not indicate agreement at all, but rather attentive listening. It means as much as I'm listening, but it doesn't mean I agree, and it probably even doesn't mean I understand. So be careful with these ones. It is always important to use simple language. Not all Japanese speak English very well, and use a lot of repeated statements. So make sure that you get your messages across. Do say things that are very important to you and that you would like to point out. Do say them more than only one time. And as I said before, instead of making questions, instead of making statements, please use a lot of questions and soft terms. So whenever it is about a doubt that you have or a criticism you like to make, a question is a good idea. And then as a general tip at the end, avoid any heated discussions with clients. It should all be very, very friendly and harmonious, an exchange of questions and answers to questions, things like that. But as soon as it gets controversial, the Japanese may be very, very irritated. And also, I would like to point out that whenever you are in an official meeting with the Japanese, such as a first-time meeting or a webinar, a seminar, a visit, anything delicate or critical should be left out. It is better to address more critical topics when you're not in a meeting room, for example, when you are going out with the Japanese for a little drink or something like that. So these are the recommendations and tips for communication in general. Let's take one more look at what a first-time meeting could look like and what kind of reactions you can expect from team members and their roles. Mr. Rodriguez is the chief negotiator and highest ranking member of a Spanish white goods manufacturer who has come to Japan to negotiate a new contract. As the senior person on the Spanish side, Mr. Rodriguez is the one who takes the floor and does most of the talking. To his very astonishment, his Japanese senior counterpart stays silent most of the time and passes over to junior members who answer questions on his behalf. It also happens that the Japanese suddenly start to speak and discuss among each other and ignore the Spanish team for a while. The Spanish find this quite rude already, but they feel utterly offended when single members doze off during the important meeting. Now, here we've got a number of different behaviors that you may come across and find irritating. Let's summarize them briefly. In a Japanese meeting team, the senior person may not even speak very much, him or herself, but he or she rather orchestrates the comments of the team. The center person, the most senior one, often likes to hold back a little bit and leave the floor to younger members. So that's very, very normal in Japanese business. And if you want to, you can, of course, also mirror this kind of behavior. Then expect a lot of side talk in the Japanese group. The Japanese need this sometimes to make alignments among one another. They find it difficult to raise their hand and just speak up as one member of the team. That is considered to be very inconsiderate in Japan. You first want to create alignment and an understanding in the group, and then you speak up and give a message or a report to the other side of the meeting table. So they need this time to coordinate themselves. Please give it to them and wait patiently if anything like this happens. Especially in larger meetings or longer presentations, members have a tendency to listen with their eyes closed, especially higher ranking or older Japanese like to do that quite a bit. So please be aware of it, try to tolerate it. And the Japanese also like to take a lot of pauses and silences during communication. It may happen that in a meeting or during a visit, there is an awkward silence of a minute or perhaps even a little bit longer. Try not to interrupt, because the Japanese will need those pauses and silences to think about what has been said and to think about an appropriate answer. They may have difficulties to respond in English very spontaneously. So please allow that time for a little break. So these are the general meeting behaviors. And finally, let me go back to one point that I mentioned earlier. I said when I talked about communication and communication tips that not all communication, especially critical topics, are addressed in official meetings. So this is a little bit of an example or case study to highlight that fact a little more. It's about Miss Leclerc. She's working as a sales manager for a cosmetics company from France. 10 months ago, she has successfully placed a cosmetic series on the shelves of a well-known Japanese department store chain. The series includes care products for various skin types, as well as makeup products. She is right now visiting the headquarters of the store chain to get feedback. During the day meeting, the Japanese managers have nothing but positive things to say. In the evening, after a few glasses of beer, the Japanese manager sitting next to Mrs. Leclerc comes up with a confession that while the care products are very well accepted, the colors of the makeup are too bright for Japanese ladies and will therefore be discontinued. Mrs. Clerc is shocked. Why did nobody tell her so at the meeting? I guess you can answer that question by now. Why did nobody tell her? It was just not the moment. Critical information is not to be addressed officially. The Japanese would say that in official meetings, you can only speak with what they call your tatemae opinion. So that's the politically correct opinion. Anything that doesn't hurt anybody, anything that doesn't make anybody lose face. But when you're sitting together in an unofficial setting, such as in a bar or perhaps during a little coffee break after the meeting, something like that, you are allowed, even in Japan, to say what you really think. You can say your true meaning and opinion, and that would be hone. So stay away with critical comments from the official meetings and rather postpone anything that is perhaps a little bit sensitive to a later point in time. Tips for meetings. Let's quickly summarize that. Remember that meetings may not always produce solid results, especially first-time meetings. I said that before. They are rather made for building relationships. So please do not expect too much from a first-time encounter. Please think of the Japanese meeting behavior. It could be very hierarchy and consensus oriented, with Japanese not speaking so much, doing a lot of side talk, seniors holding back, and so forth, what we said. And then finally, critical issues are better discussed in official so-called hone settings. Right. And then finally, in the evening, just taking a quick look at the time so as to allow, this will take me some 5 minutes, I guess, and then we can do the Q&A session. If that is all right, timing wise, Anna, are we still good?
I think we are. I think we're going to be good. So
very well. So very good. If you're taken to a restaurant, expect to take your shoes off and wear slippers on wooden floors. You may be taken to so-called tatami rooms, that are these ones here with rice straw mats on the floor. On such flooring, you can only wear socks and you need to take off even the slippers. So remember that. And as always, just do as the Japanese do, and you will be good. As for the food, you may be coming across very different kinds of foods. When you just have a quick lunch together somewhere, people may be serving you a so-called obento box. That's a lunch box with many different things inside, like sushi, rice, vegetables, whatever. These are individual boxes, and eat them in any way and order that you like. Whereas when you go out together in the evening, you may have shared platters, a lot of different foods, arriving on the table that everybody shares. So these big plates are for everybody to serve themselves from. This is another form of doing things. And then finally, you, in a very formal setting, may also expect a course menu. On this picture here on the right hand side, you can see different courses of a complete menu. So these delicacies may all be coming up one after another during the meal. So these are the different settings that you should be prepared for. It is impossible to explain how you eat all those things in detail, but there are certainly a few general rules for eating and drinking. So first of all, do not pour yourself alcoholic drinks. Others will serve you. Usually they will have large bottles with sake or with beer on the table, and as soon as they arrive, somebody grabs them and will try to pour you a drink, and that is fine. You can serve the others afterwards, but don't serve yourself with alcohol. Somebody else will do it for you. If you eat from those large shared platters that I showed on the previous slide, please use the bottom end of your chopsticks for taking food from those platters, and then put the food on your own little plate or on the rice bowl. Turn around the chopsticks so as to make sure that the part of the chopsticks that lands in your mouth never touches food that other people may eat. So this is a measurement for good hygiene. And then while blowing your nose is not accepted in Japan, so if you've got a runny nose, you better go that is the better way to approach it. While blowing your nose is not accepted. Also, blurping and munching are very impolite in Japan. So they are very keen on perfect eating and table manners. I think a matter, of course, for all us as well. And once you finish a meal, please make sure that all the items go back to their original places. For example, you may have had a cover on the bowls. Please put the covers back. Your chopsticks may have come in a little paper sachet, so put them back there, and things like that somehow clean the table a little bit and make it almost look as before, as a signal that you've finished your meal, and also as a general sign of politeness. As for behavior at social events in the evening, please be prepared for Japanese to drink a lot and loosen up. During the day, they may be very stiff, keeping their distance, but in the evening, they may be very open, making jokes, singing along, things like that. So don't be surprised. But you can adapt to those behaviors as much as you like. As women, please stay yourselves. Japanese ladies often serve the drinks, they often serve the food, things like that, just because they are the women. You don't have to do that. In general, what are good topics for small talk? Anything that compares your country to Japan. What do you like about Japan? Is it your first time? Compare with your country. Anything on food and personal background is good. Topics to be avoided are, for example, whale and dolphin hunting, what happened at Fukushima, and of course, Japan's role in World War II. So stay away from those politics, I would like to suggest. And that pretty much finalizes my presentation, so that I do hope that we've got still some time left for all the questions that you may still be having. Is there anything that perhaps has arrived in chat or that you would like to ask me right now? I stop sharing for a moment. If there is a need to come back, I'll be happy to do so in a second. Anything that is still unclear that you would like to know about, please don't hesitate.
I have a question if nobody else does,
Please.
which is when it comes to digital communication, right? So after the
Mhm.
workshop, sorry, after the trade mission, they might end up discussing with the Japanese companies.
Right.
Digitally, what is the informal meeting structure? Like, what is the version of an informal meeting when it's digital? Is it like this? Is it like a web video call? Is that an informal part, or what would you say?
Yeah, it always depends on how many people are present. If there's too many people there, it easily
Ah,
becomes official, and you've got all those hierarchies as
okay.
well. So if you want to choose unofficial in a digital way, it should be one-on-one or one-on-two maximum to
Okay.
allow the intimacy that is needed. The logic is that you want to get away from the big group that puts a lot of restrictions on you, and you look out for a more intimate and smaller channel. So it could be a telephone conversation, it could be a one-on-one
Right.
session like this, it could also be one-on-one email communication. That would make sense to me, but to be honest, it takes a little while until those channels, unofficial channels, are actually established. So
true.
you can't do it first thing after you come back from the trade mission.
Right. So let's say even if I call someone from a Japanese company and they're in a room with everyone, would that also not allow them to
That
treat
that
it
would
as one-on-one?
that would allow them to treat it
Okay,
as
okay.
one-on-one, even
So
if they can
even
be heard.
okay.
Yes, but as I said, it doesn't work right away. It takes some time of building the relationship before you have actually reached that level, unless you're there. When you're there, it makes things a lot easier, of course.
Okay.
But meeting them once and then calling up and thinking you already got this special connection is perhaps expecting a little bit too much.
Right.
Like
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
Very well. Anything else? Please do not hesitate to write in chat in case that you've got any questions at all. I'm following this here.
Yeah, for now, it seems not much. I guess in terms of let's say the company visit itself, let's say, is there anything specific that they should keep in mind? Let's say, not asking, I mean, they can ask anything in terms of,
Yes.
there's no really limitations.
No. I think for a first-time visit, what you would ask are questions about the company history, things like that. So it's very much on the level of exchanging information about one another. And in that area, you can't do much wrong.
Right.
What you need to watch out for is, of course, their reactions. If you ask a question and they go like, or if there's no answer at all, you get the signal that you may have overstepped or they are embarrassed to answer.
Right.
So if there is that kind of reaction, then better pull out and shift the topic to something else so as to avoid any embarrassment. But otherwise, no, that's perfectly fine. And also, please be very open with information about your company. I don't know if you've got presentations or anything that you would like to bring along. No restrictions there. So the more information you deliver about yourselves, your companies, what you're doing, the better it is. I think they like details and they like a lot of info, so go for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very good. I recommend to make sure you know the history of your company very, very well, because they're really into the tradition and the story.
Yes, yes.
so that's,
Who are the people? Who are the senior people? They also want to know. For example, if you're a family business, and some 50 years ago, the grandfather of the current president or CEO has founded the company. That is very interesting. Show some projects, some references. They will not know your companies. It is just like that. And so as to create some interest, but also create a feeling of trust, give them an idea of who you are, and history, company history plays a big role here, as a matter of fact.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Also, perhaps, Andrea, if there's anything from your side.
I was going to ask if there are any other topics to avoid, maybe during a conversation with.
No, it's actually not that sensitive. If you avoid the political side of things, which I think we would also do in business, you are very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
They usually say a lot of questions is also good. So try to perhaps think about when you ask those questions. Usually when you do a company visit, there's the first meeting in a meeting room that is still very official. So if you just throw a lot of questions at them at that time, it may just burst their schedule or seem inappropriate. But usually after that, you will be taken on a little tour through the company, and that is exactly the moment where you create those little one-on-one talks, where you enable this kind of communication. So if you've got a lot of detailed questions that you would like to ask, perhaps wait for the tour where you can, just address one person and do not need to speak to everybody at the same time. I think that is something to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
But question-wise, no, I couldn't think of anything that would make them lose face or something like that.
Okay.
You should be good.
Would you like to ask a question? If you've turned on your camera.
I think that's perhaps Marius with us now.
Yeah.
Hello.
Telling from the picture. Good.
Yes. Thank you for this interesting lecture.
Thank you.
In fact, will be for us an occasion to study and to analyze this recording. I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
We struggled a lot to organize this trade mission, and probably we made some mistakes. We made it too complex, maybe, and we asked for offers from the biggest Japanese companies for logistics solutions, and suddenly all the prices were very high during the Sakura period, this cherry blossom of time. And we just suddenly saw that we are in this situation when we have to announce all the business partners, all the that we have to reschedule the meetings. So we try to explain this situation to our counterparts and trying to not to lose their trust. So give us some advices how to postpone some meetings with Japanese partners.
Yeah, actually, it's not that critical unless they have already made a lot of preparations, and then you suddenly, pull out you cause them a lot of inconvenience. The most important advice that I can give is apologize, and the second most important one is apologize, and the third most important one is apologize. And in this case, perhaps give them a little reason, but do not explain too much indeed, because explanations, even if you say, I'm sorry, I'm late, the bus was late, it doesn't seem like an explanation, but it seems like a lame excuse. It can seem like a pretext to the Japanese. So I would say stick with one argument. And I would also say if the cost is the real issue, yeah, you could perhaps even mention that. It's a little bit of a fine line, actually. But to center and focus on one argument and apologize, and do that in a very, very formal way. And if at the same time you can already say, okay, we don't do it this spring, but we will do it in the summer, and you have an alternative up your sleeve, I think that should be good. And apologies should come from the highest possible people in your organizations.
We use that to apologize from the CEO, but also we asked our representative in Japan to talk directly on the phone in Japanese with.
Even better. Didn't know you had this kind of structure, but if you do, I think you did it all very well, because they are the people that really have got the feeling for what is appropriate, how they can explain, and they can somehow substantiate and reinforce what has been done from your side. So I think you did it. You did it very well. Did you get any funny reactions, or did you get reactions at all? Does it still make you worry?
In fact, we had some surprising feedback that some suppliers intended to discuss directly with other suppliers, which made this mess, and to solve it between them, to understand. On the other hand, we have some partnership with some city halls. They are more official. And everybody had this attitude to how to help.
But that's a good sign, I think, and also people at lower levels or at other levels already having direct connections and trying to solve things on that level is quite a good sign. So I'm quite optimistic here that you can fix it.
Yes, it's the biggest challenge for us.
Yes, I can imagine, but I think you're on a good path here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess this is it from the questions. So if there's anything else you'd like to ask, you can of course send emails to me or Angela. I'm not sure if she put her email in the presentation. I think she did. So feel free to contact us if I have any other questions. And thank you very much for coming to this workshop on Japanese business culture. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, Marius. I hope everyone has a great end of the week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My thanks also go out to Andrea, Marius, and Anna. And I wish you all a good weekend and a successful visit to Japan.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.